Welcome back to True Night Voices. Tonight everything might be quiet. Or not. Put on your headphones. Let's begin. You don't need a ghost to feel haunted. Sometimes it's just a laugh at the wrong hour, a knock when no one's there, or a suitcase that never stays closed. Tonight, I'll tell you 3 stories. Real ones. Quiet ones. The kind that slip in through the walls and wait behind your door. So turn down the lights, let the silence settle, and listen closely. He brought it home every single night. Always the same suitcase, always the same silence. You don't really know your neighbors. Not truly. You might nod politely in the hallway, maybe exchange the occasional good morning, or comment about the weather. But beyond that, most of us live next to strangers, people whose lives unfold just inches away behind a locked door, in complete privacy. I never thought much about that, until he moved in. It was late autumn when apartment 4C became occupied. I live in 4B right next door. I remember the sound of the new tenant dragging furniture down the hallway and the soft thud of boxes being set down. I didn't introduce myself. It's not that I'm unfriendly, I just prefer the comfortable silence of boundaries. And besides, something about him discouraged conversation. Tall, thin, always dressed in pressed slacks and a tucked-in shirt. His eyes never really met mine. He looked at people like he was studying them clinically, like we were specimens. And he never smiled. Not once. But that wasn't the strange part. The strange part was the suitcase. It started the first night. It was around 10:30 p.m. when I first heard the wheels. That dragging, uneven sound of small plastic wheels scraping against our old tile floors. I cracked my door open just enough to peek into the hallway. There he was pulling a large, black, hard-shell suitcase. One of those heavy-duty kinds, like something you'd carry sensitive equipment in. It thumped against the elevator door as he waited, then disappeared behind the sliding panels. I remember thinking, maybe he just returned from a trip. But the next night, it happened again. Same time, same suitcase. Then again the night after that. And the night after that. A routine, like clockwork. He left early every morning, too early for me to see what he carried with him, if anything. But at night, just before 11, I'd hear it. Thump, scrape, thump. The wheels on the floor, the slow approach, the door unlocking, then silence. He never made any other sounds. No music, no TV, no calls. Just him and the suitcase. For the first week, I tried to ignore it. People are weird, right? We all have quirks. Maybe he worked in tech and had sensitive files. Maybe he was a musician with expensive gear. Maybe. But none of those explanations sat right. Because it was every single night. Same case, same time, never changing. And it was starting to mess with my head. Imagination is a dangerous thing. I began lying in bed, eyes open in the dark, picturing what could be inside that suitcase. My thoughts twisted themselves into absurd shapes. Was it full of bones? Old tapes? A mannequin in pieces? A preserved animal? I hated that I was thinking this way. But it was like my brain couldn't help itself. The more silence he surrounded himself with, the more noise it created in me. One night, I sat by my door with the lights off, waiting for the sound. 10:28 p.m. Right on schedule. The dragging, the thumping. I held my breath and peeked through the peephole as he passed. His expression was blank. No emotion, just methodical movement. He stopped outside his door right next to mine, inserted the key, pulled the suitcase inside, and closed the door gently behind him. That night, I dreamed of the suitcase again. Only this time, in the dream, it opened by itself. I looked inside, but instead of an object, there was just a deep, black void, endless, pulling me in. I woke up sweating, trying to understand. By the end of the second week, curiosity had turned into obsession. I tried to listen through the wall between our apartments. It was an old building, thin drywall. I could usually hear neighbors sneeze or drop a spoon. But his apartment was silent. Not quiet, silent, completely. I couldn't even hear the hum of a fridge. It was like nothing lived there. I even asked around subtly, trying not to sound paranoid. The lady down the hall, Mrs. Delaney, just shrugged. Nice enough, fella. Quiet. One of the maintenance guys told me he hadn't had any work orders from 4C. You say he brings what every night? When I explained the suitcase, the guy just gave me a weird look. Maybe he's got a night job, like transporting medical stuff. But why wouldn't he leave the case at home? Why carry it in and out every night? Unless it was something he didn't want anyone else near, something private or illegal or dangerous. Breaking the silence. One Friday night, I made up my mind. If I ever passed him in the hallway again, I'd ask about it. Just a casual comment, nothing invasive, just something to ease my mind. The opportunity came faster than I expected. I had stayed late at work, and as I stepped out of the elevator around 10:25 p.m., there he was, coming in through the lobby doors, suitcase in tow. Our eyes met, briefly. I forced a smile. Long day? He paused. Then, in a flat voice, always. That was it. He turned, walked past me, and entered his apartment. I stood there, unsure if I felt relieved or disturbed. The night I couldn't ignore. Everything shifted a few nights later. I had been dozing off on the couch when I heard it, not the wheels this time, but a click. Like the sound of a door trying to be opened, then a soft thump against the wall, my wall. I froze, slowly got up and tiptoed to my door. Through the peephole, I saw him standing perfectly still in front of my apartment. The suitcase was beside him. He wasn't moving, not trying to unlock anything, just standing there. After what felt like forever, he slowly turned and went into his apartment. I didn't sleep that night, seeking the truth. The next morning, I contacted the building manager, asked if 4C had any maintenance issues, any complaints, anything unusual. She checked her records. Nothing. I asked casually if he was allowed to store things in his unit. She looked confused. As long as it's not illegal or hazardous, sure. Then I asked if tenants ever received keys to other apartments. She laughed. Of course not. I nodded, thanked her, and left. But the question kept echoing in my head. Why had he been standing in front of my door? What I found. The final straw came a week later. I returned home late, and as I walked down the hall, I noticed something outside his door. A thin red line, almost invisible. Blood? I leaned closer. No, it wasn't fresh. It looked like a smudge from something being dragged. From the elevator to his door. The suitcase. That night, I dreamed again. This time, I opened the suitcase. Inside was me, staring up, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. He left, but the questions stayed. Then, just like that, he was gone. One morning, I opened my door and saw a piece of paper taped to 4C. vacant under inspection. He left no forwarding address, no word. The building manager said he gave notice suddenly, packed up and left within a day. I asked if he left anything behind. She hesitated. There was a case, but it was empty. Closing thoughts. That was 3 months ago. Someone else lives in 4C now, a young woman with a golden retriever who smiles at everyone. But sometimes, late at night, I swear I hear the faint sound of suitcase wheels scraping across tile. And when I hear that, I don't open my door. I don't breathe. I just wait, eyes on the clock, watching the minutes pass. Because some neighbors leave more than just silence behind. At night, he laughs, alone, and it never sounds right. Most of us don't really notice our neighbors until something feels off. I had lived in this apartment for over 4 years. Same walls, same ceilings, same creaky pipes in winter. Nothing ever stood out, not until Steve moved in upstairs. He was in his early 40s, maybe mid. Tall, wiry, with that kind of posture that made him look either deeply confident or like he was trying to disappear. He wore sunglasses all the time, even when the sky was gray and the building hallways dim, and he didn't talk much. Just a quiet nod whenever we passed on the stairs, the kind that says, "I see you, but don't speak to me." I didn't mind. I actually liked the quiet, until the laughing started. It began on a Tuesday. I remember it because I was working late, around 1:30 a.m., the kind of night when the world feels like it's wrapped in cotton, everything hushed, even the streetlights outside somehow dimmer. And then a laugh. Not loud, but sharp and sustained, like a thread being pulled too tight. At first, I thought it was a late-night show playing upstairs. You know, maybe he couldn't sleep. Maybe he was watching reruns or a stand-up special. But then the laugh came again and again. Not in bursts, like you'd hear with TV, but long, oddly rhythmic, like someone was truly, deeply amused. Alone. The next night, and the next. It happened again the next night, almost at the exact same time. 1:30 a.m. A single laugh followed by a pause, then another. Sometimes he muttered something before it barely audible through the thin ceiling. The third night, I heard, "That's it. That's right. Now watch this." Then laughter. Soft, like someone giggling into their own hands. That's when the hairs on my arms stood up. Because no one else was laughing. Just him. I muted everything in my apartment, my laptop, my phone, even my old kitchen clock that ticks too loud just to listen, to really listen. And it became clear, and that wasn't TV, and that wasn't any show. That was him. I started writing it down. I'm not sure when exactly it became a routine, but I started keeping a notebook. Each night, I wrote down the time the laughing started, how long it lasted, what kind of laugh it was. 9:03, 1:37 a.m., short bursts, wheezy, almost like he was struggling to catch his breath. 5, 1:30, 1 a.m. Deep chuckles, followed by whispering couldn't make out words. 9:08, 1:35 a.m. Silence, then sharp laugh, like something startled him or delighted him suddenly. There was something deliberate about it, like a ritual. It stopped always around 2 a.m., never longer, never earlier. I tried to tell myself, maybe he's rehearsing lines, Maybe he's a voice actor or something weird like that. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. Because no matter how hard I tried to explain it, the truth is, his laughter never sounded right. It didn't carry joy, or surprise, or even irony. It sounded like a laugh without a soul behind it. The night it changed. One night, I decided to say something. I ran into Steve in the mailroom just after 7 p.m. He was wearing a gray windbreaker, sunglasses, and holding a small package under his arm, the kind that might hold books or something heavier. I tried to be casual. "Hey, I don't mean to be weird, but I sometimes hear, laughing at night. Through the ceiling. Around 1:30? He stopped. Just stopped mid-step. Then he turned to me slowly, the corners of his mouth twitching. That's when I saw it for the first time. A smile. Not warm, not embarrassed. But recognition. You hear that? I nodded. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then, some things are just funny. And then he laughed. Right there. Just once. But I recognized it immediately. It was the same laugh I'd heard through the ceiling, the same strange cadence, the same rising pitch at the end. I felt cold, like the hallway had suddenly dropped 10 degrees. Trying to move on. After that, I stopped trying to explain it. But I couldn't stop hearing it. Night after night, always between 1:30 and 2 a.m. There were variations. Sometimes I heard him pacing. Once, a thump like he'd knocked something over. But always, the laugh returned. I stopped sleeping well. My dreams were thin and brittle. I started waking up at 1:29 a.m. before the laugh began, like my body had adjusted to its schedule. At work, I was exhausted, irritable. People started asking if I was okay. I lied, said I had insomnia. How do you explain to someone that you're losing sleep over your neighbor's laugh? Something behind the wall. One night around 1:20 a.m., I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, and I heard something new. Not a laugh, not muttering, but scratching. Slow, deliberate, like fingernails against drywall, not quite loud, but constant. Then silence. Then his voice, clear as if he were whispering in my ear. Don't worry, it's almost ready. I sat up in bed, heart pounding so hard I thought it might stop. Almost ready? What was almost ready? A visit from maintenance. About a week later, I caught the maintenance guy, Jorge, outside my building and asked if he'd been called to 3B Steve's apartment. He frowned. Not recently. Why? I hesitated. Just sometimes there's this noise, like maybe he's working on something? At night? Jorge shrugged. Haven't heard anything. You want me to check it out? I shook my head. No, it's fine, just wondering. But it wasn't fine. Not really. Because that very night, I didn't hear laughter. I heard crying. High-pitched, soft, like someone muffling a sob into their sleeve. It didn't sound like Steve. It sounded younger. I couldn't take it anymore. 2 nights later, I knocked on his door. I don't know what I planned to say. Maybe I wanted him to know I was watching, that he wasn't invisible. He opened the door a crack, just enough to look at me through the gap. Yes? I swallowed. Sorry to bother you. I thought I heard someone crying upstairs. A pause. His head tilted, almost amused. You think you heard someone? He opened the door a little wider. Behind him, the apartment was dark. I mean dark, no lights, no lamps, just shadows. He leaned in slightly. You shouldn't listen so hard. It makes you hear things that aren't there. And then he smiled again. That same smile. The final night. I couldn't sleep. Around 1:33 a.m., the laugh started again. But this time, it didn't stop. It grew louder, louder than I'd ever heard it. It echoed. It vibrated through my walls. It wasn't joyful. It wasn't amused. It sounded triumphant. And then it changed. The pitch dropped, slowed, became wet like someone laughing with a mouthful of water. And finally silence. Just silence. That silence lasted until morning. He was gone. The next day, there was a notice on the building bulletin board. Apartment 3B vacated. No forwarding address. The landlord said he'd left in the middle of the night, took nothing but a single duffel bag, said he'd paid 3 months ahead but didn't leave a note. I didn't ask any more questions. The new tenant moved in a week later, a college student with a cat and a girlfriend who visits on weekends. They laugh sometimes, but it sounds normal. Human. But sometimes around 1:30 a.m., when I lie awake, I swear I hear it again. Faint, muffled, coming from the wall, not the ceiling. Just a whisper of that terrible, familiar laugh. And I wonder, was he ever really laughing alone? She said she didn't have a cat, but I saw it. We all did. I'd been living in that old apartment complex for nearly 4 years. It was the kind of place no one really dreamed of living in. Chipped paint on the walls, an ever-present smell of mildew in the halls, and floorboards that groaned like they were tired of holding you up. People kept to themselves. You passed by them in the hallway, nodded maybe, but that was about it. Just shadows drifting past one another. Mrs. Agnes lived at the very end of the ground floor hallway, next to the emergency exit. She was somewhere in her 70s, petite, with skin like old crumpled tissue paper. She always wore the same gray wool cardigan and walked without a cane, even though her movements were slow and deliberate, like she was conserving something fragile. She was nice. In that quiet way old women can be polite, soft-spoken, and with a faint, near-constant smile. But something about her didn't sit right, not in a way I could explain. Just off. No one ever saw her leave for groceries, yet her kitchen always seemed stocked. No packages were ever delivered, no family, no friends ever visited. Her TV was never on, her windows never opened. And then there was the cat. A black cat, big, sleek, with fur so dark it swallowed light. Its eyes were the sharpest yellow I'd ever seen, like tiny suns burning in a midnight sky. It never roamed far. Always stayed right outside her door. Sat there for hours, completely still, like it was waiting for something, or guarding it. It never seemed afraid of people, but it didn't approach anyone either. It was hers. Everyone just assumed that. Until one day, I passed by as she was watering a plastic plant hanging in her window. The cat was lying beside her doormat. I smiled and said, without thinking, "Your cat seems really calm." She looked up at me with this strange, honest expression in her cloudy eyes. "I don't own a cat, dear. Never have." She said it so plainly. I didn't know how to respond. That chill, the one that crawls up the back of your neck when something doesn't add up, hit me instantly. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but she had already turned and closed the door, quietly, softly. The cat stayed, staring at the closed door, like it hadn't heard her denial, or like it had, and didn't care. A few nights later, it was raining hard. I got off work late, and by the time I got to the building, I was soaked, even with a coat. I parked near the alley beside the complex, not ideal, but the only spot left. As I ran toward the back entrance, I saw it, the cat, curled up against a cold metal drain pipe, soaked, shivering, hurt, maybe. One of its legs looked twisted. It didn't move when I approached. I felt something twist in my chest. Without thinking, I took off my coat and gently wrapped it around the cat. It didn't resist. Its eyes fluttered open for a second, not fear, not aggression, just pain. I held it close and hurried inside, my shoes squeaking across the tile floor. When I got to my apartment door and reached for the key, the cat was gone. Just gone. My coat was still there, soaked and limp in my arms, but no weight, no fur, no sound, nothing. I spun around, looked down the hallway, checked the stairwell. Not a single door had opened, not a single sound. The cat had disappeared as suddenly as it had come. I barely slept that night. Every sound made me flinch. Every shadow looked too dark, too sharp. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had touched something I wasn't supposed to, that I had been. Noticed. 2 days later, the hallway started to smell. It was faint at first, sour, musty, but by that evening it was unmistakable. A mix of mold, rotting meat, and something worse. Something old. Like a forgotten thing that had been festering behind a wall for decades. The smell was coming from Agnes's unit. Her door was closed as always. The building manager, Mr. Jackson, a gruff guy in his 50s with a permanent frown, was called. He knocked, waited, no answer. Eventually, he called a locksmith, citing a potential medical emergency. When the door finally swung open, the smell hit us like a physical force. It was ice cold inside, though the heater was running. Everything was in perfect order, tidy, neat, untouched. Like a dollhouse no one played with anymore. And right in the center of the living room, lying atop a faded floral rug, was the cat. The black cat, curled up, still, eyes wide open, dull, glassy, lifeless. It had been dead for at least 2 days, maybe more. There were no signs of entry, no broken windows, no blood, no mess, nothing. Just the cat. But here's the thing, Mrs. Agnes wasn't home. She'd been in the hospital since the morning after I found the cat in the alley. A minor stroke, we were told later. She had been taken away quietly. No sirens, no commotion, and yet, the cat had ended up inside her locked apartment sometime after I last saw it. Everyone was confused. The building staff said they'd handle it. Someone disposed of the body. The rug was cleaned. The apartment aired out. Life moved on. Except for me. I couldn't stop thinking about it. A few days after she returned from the hospital, I saw her again. She looked thinner, paler, but still wearing that same cardigan. Still quiet. Still smiling. People greeted her cautiously, but she was her usual self. No mention of the incident, no trace of concern. But I couldn't leave it alone. One evening, I knocked on her door. She answered slowly, but without surprise, as if she had been expecting me. I took a breath. My voice trembled despite myself. "Do you know what happened?" I asked. She studied me. Her gaze was distant, almost tired. She turned slightly, looked down the hallway, and then back at me. "There are things," she said softly, "that aren't meant to be understood, dear." That was it. No explanation, no emotion. Just a quiet statement, like she was talking about the weather. Then she gave me a small nod and closed the door. I moved out the following week. Didn't say goodbye to anyone. Didn't leave a note. I just packed my things and left before sunrise one morning as if I was escaping something. Which, maybe, I was. I live in a high-rise now, 11th floor. No pets allowed, no alleys, no odd neighbors. And yet, sometimes, in the middle of the night, I hear scratching, like claws on wood, or soft padding sounds just outside my front door. I tell myself it's just pipes, or the wind, or my imagination. But then I dream. I see the cat again, not dead, not injured, just watching me, waiting. Sometimes, in those dreams, I hear Mrs. Agnes's voice, so close, it feels like she's standing right behind me. There are things that aren't meant to be understood, and I wake up with that same cold shiver deep in my spine, the one that tells you something isn't over. Not really. If you're still with me, thank you. Maybe the stories tonight reminded you of something. A strange sound, a hallway glance, or a neighbor you never really knew. If you've ever had your own experience, you can leave it down below. Or not. Some things are better left whispered. This was True Night Voices. I'll see you next time.